A fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Cheaper, cleaner, and homegrown. Pump it up with unleaded 88.
Hello and welcome into the Channel Seed Studios for Bigger Than 12. I'm Jake Brend, joined by Derek Duke and his new camera in high definition here on the Channel Seed Studios. Derek, how's it going, man?
Doing good, man. I've been trying to get this camera thing figured out. I've gotten like 2 cameras that did not work. They just had so much lag in them, but feeling a lot better now, obviously, today. So really feeling good about that. Man, it was another great weekend of football across the Big 12. We saw some upsets, some fantastic games. My only complaint is we would always get 11 a.m. kickoffs in Central Time, and for whatever reason, we have a few Saturdays without one, despite having more teams in the conference. It doesn't make sense at all to me, and it feels so weird sitting around waiting for a Big 12 game. It's forcing me to watch the Big 10 and the SEC, which I hate doing. And it's like choosing between sitting in traffic and having a root canal, because you don't really want to do either. But my hand is forced until we get some early kickoffs in this damn conference.
It's brutal. They're extinct.
Yeah.
It's like we're seriously getting one every 3 weeks.
It's so weird. And
so they 6-day flex the Iowa State-Kansas game, whereas Kansas has put in a specific request to be as early as possible because the Chiefs play the next day. Yeah. And still they 6-day flexed it. I would hope it's going to be an 11 a.m. kick. I would guess it's probably going to be 2:30, but that's not why we're here. We're here for Bigger Than 12, presented by WealthCharter, retirement planning and tax. Simplify your wealth, and in turn, that simplifies your life. Tim Hawkins and his team, they do a great job down there, helping any expertise level that you are at, whether you're a recent college grad, your mid-30s, or your mid-60s, ready to get out of the workforce. They will do what they can to help simplify your wealth. And I mean, what else could you want? What else could you want than simple wealth? I know that I don't really want to deal with my finances, so go to an expert. They're based in Ankeny with their office. You can visit wealthcharterretirement.com to schedule an appointment with Tim Hawkins and his team. We're going to get into the 12-pack in just a minute, but the day that this releases, it's Beggars Night in Iowa. Derek, are you familiar with Beggars Night?
I have no idea what that is. You're going to have to explain that one to me.
So in Iowa, most communities trick or treat is the night before Halloween.
Okay.
This might honestly be Aiden's trivia question for today. I don't really know.
See, I didn't grow up with Beggars Nights, so I don't know much about it.
I don't know the origins of it, but almost everywhere in Iowa trick or treats the night before Halloween. But this year, there's a big storm rolling through Wednesday night, so most communities are pushing back to Thursday anyways. I don't get it, but what I do get is Halloween candy. Derek, Aiden, y'all got a favorite Halloween candy, or maybe just a Halloween candy hot take?
I'll let you go first, Aiden.
So I'm a big Kit Kat guy for Halloween. That's about all I got. They got like these new ones with, it's like witch is in the name. I can't remember the full name of it, but it has like marshmallow in the it's really good.
That does sound good.
I am a marshmallow fan. I am definitely a marshmallow fan. Mine, I am, this is going to sound crazy, and I've said it before on X, but I love dots, man. I know it's a weird, old person thing. Kyle Adema, I know you're listening to this show. How dare you make a candy bracket of Halloween candy and not include dots? That's absolutely disrespectful. I will not stand for that whatsoever. I am team dots all the way. That's one of my favorite Halloween candies, and I loved it because nobody else, like none of your friends, wanted to eat it because that was the first thing that was like traded away, and I would take all the dots.
That's wild. I don't know if this is a hot take. I like Milk Duds. I love Milk Duds. Okay, good. I'm a big candy corn guy. Throw it in with some peanuts.
I like the
and
pumpkins
M&Ms.
too.
See, I don't mind the pumpkins. I just can't do a handful of them. They make me sick. Big fentanyl guy. No, I'm kidding. I get the fentanyl and the razor blades out of the Halloween candy. But Reese, you can't go wrong with any. Reese's, Snickers, Twizzlers. I honestly,
Not a Reese's guy. I don't like peanut butter and chocolate. Do not like. I like them separately. I don't like peanut butter and chocolate touching.
That's insane.
Nope. Trash.
Wow.
I need to get you checked out. Dots, Reese's.
I'm kind of thrown off.
Beans for breakfast. God.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. We're not going to get that started on this.
Gosh, I don't even know where to go.
For another time.
Yeah, Aiden, you're already up on camera. I was hoping we'd talk Halloween a little bit longer, but let's just get into the 12 pack.
Let's do it. All right. Jake, we'll start the week as always. Most impressive team of the weekend.
I'm so sorry to BYU. I have doubted for too long. I've been skeptical. I followed the math. I followed the quote unquote experts, Vegas. Everyone's been wrong. BYU is a top 10 team, a bona fide top 10 team, and they proved that with a dominant win over Central Florida. You can try and poke holes, but at this point, they're 8-0. They've got 4 games to go, a pretty favorable schedule left. I am done being critical of the Cougars, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry to all of their fans, to that program, to Kalani Sitake. It is unbelievably impressive what they've done.
I'm rolling with Colorado today. They beat Cincinnati 34-23, and I don't think the score tells the whole story of that game because Colorado was in control of that game from start to finish, and they honestly took their foot off the gas late. Shedeur Sanders was fantastic, and my goodness. How about Travis Hunter? He finished with 9 catches, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns, and had 3 pass breakups defensively. Just give the man the damn Heisman already, or at least book his ticket to New York City at this point. But what really impressed me was Colorado's ability to run the football and play good defense. I've said all year long, if they can do that, then they can compete with anybody in this conference, and they certainly look like a Big 12 title contender to me on Saturday against Cincinnati.
I've been wrong about Colorado. I buried them for dead. Here's another team that I'm pretty sure every single person in the world was wrong about. Sorry, Aiden, I just went right into our disappointing team. I don't know why, but now that we're here,
roll with it. All you, brother.
It's Utah. If you would have told me in mid-September that Utah would lose on the road at Houston, I would have thought that was the biggest upset of the college football season. With what we'd seen from Houston, with what we expected out of Utah, and at that point, we already knew Cam Rising's health was in question. Still, even with Isaac Wilson, you'd think, yeah, Utah's going to handle Houston, and they look like a bottom-tier Big 12 team, and I just can't even begin to express how disappointing that is. It's unreal. It's just truly crazy.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I'm going Texas Tech. Most people, including myself, thought they could be 5-0 in Big 12 play heading into this weekend. In the last 2 weeks now, they have completely shit the bed. I know starting quarterback Barrett Morton went down with an injury, and I thought Hammond did a nice job when he came in his absence. And yeah, he had a bad fumble late in that game, I'm not going to lie, but that loss was 110% on that Texas Tech defense. Against TCU, Tech gave up 3 big touchdown plays. 2 of them were over 70 yards. And get this, the Red Raiders have the worst scoring defense in the Big 12 and the worst passing defense, not just in the Big 12, but in the entire country, dead last. So that is just completely unacceptable from Texas Tech.
Yeah, we were having a discussion about them 3 weeks ago about if they would be undefeated in Big 12 play heading into Ames, and back-to-back rivalry losses that mostly hinge on the defense. Very disappointing.
Knows? Game day may have come to Ames if Texas Tech was undefeated in Big 12 play. If they take care of business the last 2 weekends, Ames could be hosting College Game Day.
Thanks a lot, JV Joey.
BYU currently 8-0. They got Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, and Houston left on the schedule. Derek, do you think they can finish the regular season 12-0?
Just looking at their schedule, you mentioned Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, and obviously they're going to finish at home against Houston. I think it would be crazy to say that they won't finish 12-0. Just looking ahead, Utah is in shambles right now offensively. Kansas is getting better, but how will they handle Provo? Arizona State doesn't have a ton of guys outside of your boy Cam Scatabo, and Houston is not a very good football team, despite them knocking off Utah this last weekend. To me, it's a very favorable schedule. BYU's defense is one of the best in the Big 12, and there's no offense left on that schedule that would scare me as a BYU fan outside of maybe Kansas, I guess, with the way they're playing. And speaking of play, I really love the way Jake Retzloff's playing quarterback. He's getting better and better each week. And the Cougars, they have some weapons offensively with Lassiter and Chase Roberts. This team is not afraid to throw the football, despite what many people say about it. So the answer is yes. BYU will go 12-0 and make the Big 12 title game. And if they do that, they're going to be in the college football playoff no matter what happens in Arlington.
Yeah, it's setting up pretty nice, I think, for the Big 12 to have two teams make the playoffs. I wouldn't say it's certainly going to happen, but I think I'm probably more optimistic about it than most. Just whether it's you have an 11-1 Iowa State against a 12-0 BYU, or an 11-1 K-State against a 12-0 BYU. Obviously, you're probably going to need BYU to lose in the championship, but even then, there's a shot that a 11-1 Iowa State or an 11-1 K-State misses out on the Big 12 championship. And with how everything else is played out, I think an 11-1 team from the Big 12 is on the bubble. But we're not talking about other teams. We're talking about BYU. And I think they will finish 12-0. But I will say, I know what we've seen out of Utah has been awful and disappointing, but it's still a rivalry game. It's still going to be in Salt Lake City. It's still in a very, very tough atmosphere. And in rivalry games, you just, I don't know, you factor in the weird. It's probably going to be a 9:15 kick, I would imagine. So I think they'll beat Utah. They're better than Utah. And then the same, I guess, goes for Arizona State. We've just seen that can be a tough place to go out and play. It's not going to be as tough for BYU as other teams because they're already out west. They know what it's like playing out west. But yeah, it would be a disappointment, I think, if they lost any of those 4 games. But those are 2 sneaky, tough road games. And especially, we'll see what Arizona State looks like with Sam Leavitt back this week. We haven't really seen Arizona State in a while. They were off last week. They lost that game to Cincinnati without their quarterback. So I will be interested to see what Arizona State does this week and leading up to that BYU game, because that very well could be BYU's only shot at a loss these last 4 weeks.
UCF is currently in year 4 of the Gus Malzahn experience. 3-5 this year, 1-4 in Big 12 play. Jake, if UCF misses a bowl game, do you think they should move on from Gus Malzahn?
I don't think so. The first 2 seasons in the Big 12 have certainly been a letdown, but this is still a guy who's won a national championship. Granted, coached in a national championship. Granted, that was about a decade ago. They're recruiting well. They've obviously got guys. They've got weapons. RJ Harvey's a stud. Kobe Hudson's a stud. Xavier Townsend was a stud before he left. It's just been a weird year in Orlando. And I say all of that before even mentioning the buyout is just under $14 million. It's a team that just made the jump to the Power 5 level. I believe they get a full share of TV revenue, I think. I believe that first 4 that joined the Big 12 does get that full share, but it's still an athletic department making that jump to the next level. I just don't know if you could justify a $14 million buyout for something that hasn't been what I would call a disaster. Just pretty disappointing. Do you agree with that, Derek?
I don't know. And UCF's definitely got the resources and the money. They pump a lot of money into their NIL. So if they're willing to fire somebody or get rid of somebody, they do have the resources to do it. I was willing to give Gus a pass a few weeks ago due to his ability to recruit, but I think I'm starting to jump off the old Gus bus here. We talked about him as a recruiter, and make no mistake about it. He's second to none, but his job is about winning games, and he simply hasn't done that since UCF's moved to the Big 12. Last year went 3-6 in conference play. Now he's sitting at 1-4. there's a good chance like he goes 2-7 or 1-8 in Big 12 action this season, which is clearly not good enough. And then you had on Monday, he announced that defensive coordinator Ted Roof was gone, and coming in, like Ted Roof was a guy that wasn't all that popular. I mean, Roof was fired from Oklahoma after 2 seasons, and he didn't even last 1 season in Orlando, which is a terrible look. Then on top of that, you had Gus relieving himself of play calling duties to Tim Harris Jr. so he can put his focus on the rest of the team. Like at some point you change coordinators, but the next man to go is the head coach. And if Gus drops the ball and like this team does not show improvement, I think he should be let go. Like this UCF program deserves better with all the resources they have around them. Like we keep saying, like this UCF program is a sleeping giant, and it truly is if they can just have the right guy kind of tap into that.
Yeah, if I'm in charge of that department, it's one of those off seasons where you shuffle a lot around and you try and get desperate, try something new. I know we both somewhat like Jakari Brown, but I would say go out there, get a spread quarterback in the transfer portal, try something new, try and play a more Big 12 offense and see what you can do. And if next year's another disappointment, I'd definitely be willing to revisit.
For sure.
Jake, Sunflower Showdown last week, Kansas State 29-27 winners over Kansas. Do you think that was more of a Kansas State win or Kansas loss?
It's definitely a loss for Iowa State. That game was over, but this is a loss for Kansas. They lost the game just like they have all year long, and I just can't help but continue to draw comparisons to the 2024 Kansas football team to the 2022 Iowa State football team. In pretty much every single game, have a shot to win it at the end, or have it won like the case on Saturday night, and find a way to lose, whether it's Daniels not sliding and trying to jump over a defender to gain an extra yard to make it 3rd and 9 instead of 3rd and 10 and losing the ball, or just Jeff Grimes' inability to maybe call a screen pass or a shallow crossing route after K-State continuously blitzed up the middle. It's just, they can't help but shoot themselves in the foot. And that's not to say K-State doesn't deserve credit. K-State played a C game that they did not deserve to lose. They didn't really deserve to win, but at this point, you're in survival mode. You are doing all you can to get to 11-1 and try and get to Arlington so you can represent the Big 12 in the playoff, and that's what they did. So you give them credit for grinding it out, but Kansas lost that game. They just can't stop doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Kudos to Kansas State for finding a way to win that game, but Kansas gave it to them on a silver platter. It started when the Jayhawks, they fielded that kickoff and stepped out at the 1 yard line. Like next play, like Kansas cost Kansas 2 points with the safety. They also dropped a few passes. One of them was in the end zone. That cost them 6 points. And then when they had the lead, you mentioned the Daniels turnover, they had a chance to ice the game there, and he fumbled, and they even got one more chance late. Couldn't make anything happen. And I texted you guys in the chat, like Kansas State did an all-out blitz like 4 times on that final drive. Kansas did not even try to make an adjustment, run a shorter route across the middle. It's like they were trying to throw deep every single play. Like they didn't have a single route under 10 yards, which to me was crazy because there was a ton of time still left. But, they left points on the table. They made back-breaking mistakes, and they couldn't make adjustments, which seems to be the story of this Kansas team this season. And get this, Jake, Kansas has had a fourth quarter lead in 7 out of their 8 games, and they're sitting here with a 2-6 record. Just let that sink in for a bit.
That's insane. And I'll continue to draw comparisons to that 2022 Iowa State team. What makes Kansas scary is the fact that they have led in the fourth quarter of so many games. There's a reason they were picked to finish, I believe, 3rd in the Big 12 coming into this year. It was certainly in the top 5. They've got the talent. That's never been the question. And in years past, they've had the discipline. So I think it's just a year from hell. It's been bizarre, but they are, as especially they've got a bye week coming up. They are good enough to scare Iowa State. They're good enough to beat Iowa State. They're good enough to scare BYU. It's not maybe as easy of a game as some might have thought 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Absolutely. Colorado finally cracking top 25 this week at 23rd, sitting at 4-1 in the conference. Let's go with Derek. Do you think they can make it to Arlington?
Man, there's a good chance of them winning out and finishing 8-1 in the Big 12 play. But the one problem, as we kind of mentioned before the show to you guys, like that Kansas State loss might come back to haunt them. But just looking at the remaining schedule, they travel to Tech and Kansas, and they host Utah and Oklahoma State. Call me crazy, but they are better than all 4 of those teams right now. But again, that loss to Kansas State may come back and bite them in the ass. But then again, you could see potentially 2 teams with an 8-1 record in conference play and possibly miss out on the Big 12 title game if Iowa State loses to Kansas State. So, Colorado really needs Iowa State and Kansas State to lose, and I just don't see that happening. So my answer would be no. But just taking a step back here for a second, with all that said, even if they go 2-2 down the stretch and finish 8-4, I would call it a very successful season for Colorado. Because
no doubt.
Nobody gave this team a chance in the preseason. The fact that we're sitting here talking about them possibly even getting to the Big 12 title game in the final month of this season, that just goes to show you how great of a job Dion and his staff have done this year.
I don't think they'll win out, but they very well could. They're going to be favored in every game. I do think they trip up either at Tech or at Kansas. Those are both teams good enough to go with them, I think. I know, Tech might be an awful matchup on their own end because of Colorado's dynamic passing attack, and we've already mentioned it, but Tech has the worst passing defense in the entire country. But even if they do win out, you mentioned that the tiebreakers are not in their favor. And I had it in the rundown. I was going to talk about tiebreakers today because I've really, really, really got in the weeds. And then I came across something that tripped me up again. I got double confused. So I'm going to shelf it. I'm going to come next week. I'm going to have a Big 12 tiebreakers for dummies. But from my early research, Colorado does not have a lot of help in the first 4 tiebreakers. So that's just a little teaser to later in the month on Bigger Than 12. But all that to be said, I don't think Colorado will be in Arlington, but there is a reason why their odds are still not considered to be too much of a long shot, because they're an Iowa State or a K-State tripping up once or twice away from being able to represent the conference.
Jake, outside of BYU, Iowa State, K-State, and Colorado, is Cincinnati the best of the rest?
I think so. When I was looking up and down the Big 12 standings, thinking about this question, I came to the realization that the middle tier of the Big 12 is probably the worst among the power conferences, whereas I think the bottom is probably stronger than any other conference. Who's the worst team in the Big 10? UCLA? Would you rather go out and play the Bruins, or would you rather go play Oklahoma State or Utah? I think I'm going to take my chances going out to play UCLA, and that's kind of besides the point. But it's really hard to think of a 5th best team in this conference because you're judging between Cincinnati, a team that I think has been pretty good and definitely has blown away both of our expectations, but is still pretty limited as far as playmakers go. And I think their ceiling is pretty low. And then you're putting them up against TCU, who has 115 turnovers this year, by far an NCAA record. You're putting them up against Texas Tech, who is the worst passing defense in the conference, putting up against Baylor, West Virginia, 2 teams with coaches on the hot seat. So I think just process of elimination, Cincy is the 5th best team in the conference. But Saturday night, losing to Colorado showed that the gap between that top 4 and the rest is pretty wide.
Yeah, to me, there's clearly a gap there between those top four and then the rest of the conference. But for me, it's hard to put them above Texas Tech, considering they have Tech has the head-to-head win over Cincinnati. But with the way they're playing, I think Cincinnati, if they played that game again, I probably think Cincinnati would win. However, I'm going with TCU. I like the way Josh Hoover's playing, and I love the weapons that he has with guys like Savion Williams. I think Cincinnati just doesn't have the firepower offensively, despite Sorsby playing well. And Cincinnati's defense, like, it's okay. It's not really that good or that great. It's kind of a concern of mine, to be honest. But don't get me wrong, like, Cincinnati's a top half team in the Big 12, but I don't think I'm ready to put them at number 5 just yet. I like the upside of TCU here.
We're going to get to it in a couple minutes, but the TCU turnovers, it just drives me insane. I'll leave it at that for now.
That's fair.
All right, Derek, rapid fire here. Buy, sell, hold, TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech.
I talked about TCU being the best team here in the second tier group, so I have to buy them now. It all comes down, like as Jake mentioned, with turnovers. When they don't turn the ball over, they are one of the better teams in the Big 12, especially with a quarterback like Josh Hoover, who's extremely talented. But again, got to cut down on the turnovers. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to hold Baylor. I mean, they've been playing well over the last 2 weeks, and it starts with Sawyer Robinson and that run game of theirs. Get this, Sawyer Robinson has thrown 8 touchdown passes to just 1 interception in the last 2 weeks, and their offense has run for nearly 600 yards on the ground during that span. It feels like this team's starting to catch a little bit of a late spark in the season, which very well could end up saving Dave Aranda's job. Like, and obviously, I'm selling Texas Tech 2 weeks ago. I was buying, and now I'm selling because just of how poorly their defense is. I mean, I went through the numbers earlier in the show. I don't really need to expand much on that. But the fact that they have the worst pass defense in the entire country kind of says it all here.
So I'm going completely different on all of these. This is good for content, but it's probably going to surprise you. I'm going to buy Baylor. Oh. So they've got the easiest schedule remaining of the 3 teams that we just mentioned. And their offense has been good in Big 12 play. Like, I would go as far to say pretty good. And if you look at their losses, so they should have beat Colorado, lost on a Hail Mary. They had BYU on the ropes in the fourth quarter and then got blown out in Ames. So I know things started poorly, but I don't think when they started 0-3, we thought that 2 of those losses would be against 2 of the 4 best teams in the conference. So I'm just going to buy up the sheer fact of what we've seen from Sawyer Robertson is something to build off of. And you mentioned that rushing attack has just been incredible the last couple games. And I know it was against Tech and Oklahoma State. And I'm going to sell TCU. I can't do it anymore. I know they've got the weapons. I feel like I've bought them several times this year. I just cannot take the turnovers. So many of them. They buried themselves a hole against Tech, get down 17, and it's just because they can't hold on to the ball. And eventually, turnovers go from kind of a luck thing to you are creating these turnovers. And I just don't think I just don't want any piece of that. It's like gambling. Do I want to bet on the team that's going to be a wild ride, or do I want to bet on the team where I can know what I can expect? And I do not know what to expect out of TCU week to week. And I'm going to hold Texas Tech. Let's just say I'm Will Hammond curious. I'm very intrigued by the guy. I know he took that hit and lost the ball, and that's your welcome to college football moment. But some of those throws, those were effortless, really tough throws. And he's going to be a player in the Big 12 for years to come. So I'm just going to hold on to their stock. And I know we're going to break down the Iowa State Tech game, and I can get into a little bit more of it there.
Jake, who has been more disappointing this year, Utah or Oklahoma State?
So coming into the year, of course, I was high on both of them. I had slight concerns that Oklahoma State overachieved last year, but that didn't stop me from, after week 1, I overreacted to them beating an FCS team, and I changed my pick to have Oklahoma State win the Big 12. So that's to say I'm really, really disappointed in them, but I still think the most disappointing team is Utah. They were the consensus favorite among most local and most national pundits. Some national pundits, I remember, I wish I could remember a few of the names off the top of my head, but I know I heard it. They called it the easiest conference to pick. There was no doubt that Utah was going to come into the Big 12 and run away with it. And here they are, 1-4. They just lost to a team that threw for 38 yards. It's unreal how much of a mess it's been in Salt Lake City. And that's, yeah. They lost Cam Rising. How can you know that? Well, look at recent history. Go out, buy some insurance. What if, I don't want to talk about Iowa too much, but would they be 1-4 right now if Brendan Sullivan was their backup? I don't think so. I think Brendan Sullivan, I guess we'll see this week against Wisconsin. I think he's a fine quarterback. He's better than Isaac Wilson. How do you not go out and get at least one Power 5 quarterback who has played just a lick of college football? It's malpractice, and it's so disappointing what's happened in Salt Lake City this year.
How dare you bring up the Iowa Hawkeyes in this podcast?
I was just using it as an example, not go out and get Brendan Sullivan himself, but I don't know. Go.
We don't even want to think about that offense, but I'm disagreeing with you, Jake. I mean, obviously both teams have been a complete dumpster fire this year, but I'm going with Oklahoma State. Utah can at least use the excuse of losing their starting quarterback and Cam Rising, and the Utes are still playing great defense. Like, you can't say that about Oklahoma State. They're on a 5-game losing streak, and just look at the way they've been playing lately. Like, offensively, they're a disaster at quarterback with Alan Bowman, who's basically one of 2 quarterbacks left on the roster that aren't hurt, and they can't run the football despite having arguably the best running back in the country with Ollie Gordon, because their offensive line stinks. And I mean, defensively, it's about as bad as it gets. I mean, they're dead last in the Big 12 in run defense. They're giving up more than 120 more yards per game on the ground than anybody else in the conference. Against Baylor, they gave up over 340 rushing yards. And did anybody see the tackling in that game? I have seen better tackling and effort in a junior high football game than from what I saw in Waco last Saturday. They were absolutely pathetic. And right now, the Cowboys, 3-5, they have to win 3 out of their next 4 just to get to 6-6. And if they don't, that'd be the first time they missed a bowl game since 2005, which was Gundy's first season there. This team is a shit show. And if Gundy doesn't make staff changes this offseason, he may as well retire, because they're going to need a fresh start going into 2025. And let me just say this, between these two teams, before the season, I had both of these teams playing for a Big 12 title, and they've made me look like a complete jackass. So I'm also kind of pissed off about that.
This is off the cuff. We didn't have this on the rundown, but let's fast forward to a year from now. Let's say one of those schools wins the Big 12. Which would you be least surprised by?
I guess maybe Utah. I feel like Utah can still hold things. Like, the thing is about Utah, as I've just mentioned, like, I still feel like they're playing outstanding defense. And I just can't say the same for Oklahoma State right now. Like, I know Utah lost their offensive coordinator too, but like, if they have a serviceable backup, like you mentioned earlier, like, we wouldn't even be having probably this conversation. But as for Oklahoma State, like, what's their excuse? They had the same high expectations. They're not playing. Like, the effort I'm seeing from Oklahoma State is just so pathetic. I really don't know how Cowboys fans are handling it right now, but they do not look like, I don't know if they could beat anybody left on their schedule. Like, Utah, I think, can be competitive in some games. Like, I don't know if they're going to win, but Oklahoma State, they have to make some serious staff changes across the board. I can't say the same for Utah.
Yeah, I agree with you. It wouldn't shock me at all next year if we're talking about a 10-2 Utah team that went out and got a top 15 transfer quarterback, and that's enough to rely on their defense. But of course, their offense has a long, long way to go.
Guys, it seems like Willie Fritz has the gears turning down in Houston. Jake, where do you see the future of Houston going in the Big 12?
I wish I had a crystal ball, because it'd be nice to know what the future of this conference looks like. But I think Willie Fritz is good enough to where Houston could be somewhat of a player in a few years. How much of a player? I don't really know. They've obviously got money. They're in Houston. They have, I guess, the advantage and disadvantage of flying under the radar in Texas. There's, I would imagine, pros and cons to that when it comes to recruiting, but also just not having that constant media attention around you can probably help. They've got the 7th best class in the Big 12 coming in 2025. That's ahead of teams like Iowa State and K-State. Of course, not the end of the world, not the end-all be-all. But all that being said, it's going to take a while. Do I think they could maybe go out and be a bowl team next year? Sure, but they still had 61 passing yards on Saturday. So what I want to see out of them, I know it's going to be a longer process. I want them to go out and get just a decent quarterback, and I'd be really intrigued to see what type of team they could be if they just even had a Nico Marchiol, like we're going to talk about in just a minute. I would be interested to see where they would be at this year because their defense is legit. There's a reason it held Iowa State to 20 points. There's a reason they kept turning Utah over. That they have a Big 12 caliber defense. It's just a matter of, can they become even below average on offense?
Yeah, I kind of took a lot of notes on this one because I felt like I had an idea of how this could play out for them. But in a perfect world, they would be a sleeping giant just waiting to be woken up. But right now, that's not the case. There's no reason for a program like Houston that they can't compete for a Big 12 title year in and year out. Like, they have the resources when it comes to money. And when you have a donor like Tillman Fertitta, who, by the way, I looked up the other day, has a net worth of over $10 billion. Their basketball program, obviously top notch. And at some point, they need that success to kind of spill into their football program. They've upgraded the stadium. They're working on new facilities, which has been a big issue. And also coaching, obviously, been a big issue. Dana left West Virginia because he felt like he couldn't win on a consistent basis and recruit there. So what the hell was his excuse at Houston? Because he's lazy. He was so lazy. When you could recruit a 60-mile radius from Houston's campus and recruit a top 25 class every single year if you find the right guys, it's going to take some time to build up what Dana obviously crumbled. But Willie Fritz, I think he's the guy to get the program up and functional until maybe somebody else comes along and takes it to another level. But the immediate future is to get to bowl games for Houston and finish with the winning conference record. In the next 5 to 10 years, like, they should be competing at a much higher level with the right guy at the helm.
The problem is Willie Fritz is 64.
Yep.
So I don't know.
Somebody else.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a stepping stone guy to where he can just get them to be a middle of the pack Big 12 team and hope they make the right hire following that to maybe get them to the next level. But it was 6 years ago, 7 years ago, Tom Herman took him to a New Year's Six Bowl. Granted, that was back when they were in the American, and it's a little easier to run the table in the American than it would be a power conference, but it's been done there, and it's not that far removed either.
And Tom didn't do it with his guys necessarily either. Like, the first year he came there, it was somebody else's. I think it was Major Applewhite was the coach there before him, and Tom Herman just came in year one and really ran things pretty well there to that Peach Bowl.
Killed Florida State, right? I think that's, yeah. Talk about a bad program. Wolf.
Derek, should West Virginia close the Garrett Green chapter and just stick with Nico Marchiol as the starter?
Honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea at all. Like, I know Garrett Green is Neil Brown's guy, and there's no questioning his toughness, but I really liked what I saw from Nico in that Arizona game. Completed 82% of his passes, didn't turn the football over, which is something Green has kind of had an issue at times this year. Obviously, Green's a better runner, but Nico is athletic enough to make things happen with his legs. Like, and let's be honest here, like, West Virginia needs to shake things up, and they're going to play a tough Cincy team on the road after their bye week this week. And I think what they maybe should do is let Green start if he's healthy. You know, obviously his health is still a concern there in Morgantown, but if he's healthy, like, let Green start and then maybe bring Nico in, maybe in the third series or something. But for me, I think both quarterbacks should be able to play, and then you can kind of figure things out from there.
Yeah, I think Marchiol showed some promise with his arm on Arizona. I mean, only 4 incompletions, almost 200 yards. Looked good. He's got more to prove, there's no doubt. But where exactly is this West Virginia season going? It's kind of a build to the future. And if you're Neil Brown, that might be the way you keep your job, is you roll with this young quarterback and say, oh, look at all the potential he showed once he got the opportunity. And that might be a pitch to save his job into 2025. And then the question is, what do you do with Garrett Green? I think Garrett Green is a good enough athlete to be in the NFL. He will not be there as a quarterback. If he's healthy, he deserves to have a role on this team. Seems like a guy that the locker room just really rallies around. I know the fan base really likes him. Neil Brown, of course, loves him. Why not try him at slot receiver, something like that, and roll with the young guy at quarterback? I think that's a way you can get creative and maybe help out all parties, because we've seen the type of athlete that Green is. And, there's a history of college quarterbacks converting to slot receiver and being successful. You look at Julian Edelman, something like that. So that's what I would do if I was Neil Brown, but I couldn't fault the guy if he went back to his guy.
Agreed.
Last but certainly not least here, Jake, what was your biggest takeaway from the weekend?
That week by week, I'm upset that Iowa State doesn't have a good loss yet, because it could be doing them so much good if they were able to go out and drop a game to a team like Northern Illinois. It could jump them up in the polls. And that's really what they're missing so far. If you check off your wish list, you're 7-0. What could you be missing? I mean, I would like the linebackers to be a little healthier, and I kind of wish they lost that Arkansas State game, because it's pretty clear that the AP voters really, really value a loss at home when you're a 28.5 point favorite. And it's just a little disappointing that Matt Campbell and his staff wouldn't have thought to do something like that. That's my biggest takeaway.
Oh, I'll definitely dive more into that when I get my little minute of fame at the end of the show. I have a whole rant.
Oh, sorry if I.
No, it's all good, dude.
Just a little teaser.
Taste. Exactly. I keep saying it every week, but anything can happen in this conference. Just looking back before the season started, like, who would have had Houston with a better conference record than Utah going into the month of November, and then who would have Oklahoma State potentially missing out a bowl game? I just think this. As we talked about earlier, like, this title race is starting to clear up a little bit with those 4 teams that we mentioned. And we're setting up for a crazy finish, which is exactly what you want heading into the month of December. So I again, can't wait. November, it's called Championship November for a reason, and we're about to get right into it.
Do you want me to share my actual takeaway? My actual takeaway is I missed the round robin.
Yep.
I spent so much time on Monday looking at these dang tiebreakers, and I gave myself an aneurysm. I was confusing myself so bad, and I'm like, I need to go take a walk. So I hope one day we can get back to the round robin schedule. Just, it is 2028. It's an even year. So Iowa State plays at Lubbock, at Stillwater, and they get to welcome in KU in West Virginia to Jack Trice Stadium. Be so much easier, and just be easier.
We could have divisions one day, or pods. It still could be on the table.
It's going to come eventually, but not right now. These mega conferences are just ridiculous. But let's say you wanted to make a road trip around the Big 12. You'd have to, let's just say you're starting in Ames, drive over to Morgantown, drive down to Central Florida, and then make your way over to Texas, stop and eat some good Mexican food in Lubbock, and then you make your way to Arizona, up through Utah, and end up back in Ames, passing through Kansas. Why did I say all that? Well, the point is, if you're going on a road trip like that, there'd be nowhere better to go before than to Freedom Tire. Get everything looked at. I'm actually going to stop in at Freedom Tire on Thursday, get an oil change. I'm going to a Chicago Blackhawks game next week, so I'm going to make sure my car is all good to go, all winterized, and make sure my tires are all set. They've got some great deals going on literally through Thursday. It all ends on Halloween, so go stop and say hi to Quentin Crowner and his team at Freedom Tire anywhere in the metro at Altoona. You can go up to Ames, Fleur Drive in Des Moines, West Des Moines, and Hickman on Urbandale. I'll be stopping by the Fleur location on Thursday to get an oil change and check out the great team that they've got over at Freedom Tire. You can visit freedomtire.com as well. Aiden, come on in. We've got a trivia question about the state of Iowa.
All right, Derek.
Ooh, I already don't like it.
Iowa leads the nation in 3 of these.
Not passing
I don't know
yards.
how to describe this. Definitely not passing yards. Agricultural. Trying to think how to word this exactly. They lead the nation in 3 agricultural things. What are they?
One's got to be pork,
So it's like production. Yeah, that's
Pork.
definitely one.
corn.
Yes.
Oh man, of course. There's a third one.
It'd be too
I
easy
don't
if it
know.
was the first 2.
I know, right? I have no idea. I don't think I would even. Is it? Wait, we talked about that cereal company. Is it something with grain? Is it a different grain? No. Okay, I give up.
So
First 2 are easy.
my original guess would have been beef, but because you said it's too easy, I don't think it's beef. Is it soybeans?
It's not.
Dang. Is it eggs?
It's eggs.
Eggs.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's
Okay.
a whole lot of chickens
go.
out there, a lot of cocks out spread across the great state
Okay.
of Iowa.
Pork and eggs. I can
mean-
do a good pork chop and eggs for breakfast. Ain't
What
nothing wrong
else?
with that.
What else do you need? Seriously.
Some beans in there. Maybe a little refried beans in there.
No thanks.
You're disgusting.
No thanks. Man, now I'm just craving a pork chop. Thanks a lot, Aiden.
Love a good pork chop. Love a good thick, juicy pork chop.
Dang it, Aiden. All right. Well, we're going to get into our Iowa State segment. We call it cracking one for the clones. Are you going to have yourself an alcoholic beverage, Derek? I will not be. I'll be sipping on my water for tonight. The Cyclones welcome in Texas Tech to Jack Trice Stadium Saturday, fresh off of a bye. It's a 2:30 kick in Ames. Is there any concern for an upset, Mr. Duke?
There's always a concern with an upset in this conference because of the depth. Just look at Houston on any given Saturday. Like, you can get upset. I mean, as for Texas Tech, my concern is something we kind of talked about earlier, is the quarterback situation. Joey McGuire gave a small update on Baron Morton, their starting quarterback, who went out with a shoulder injury last weekend against TCU. Looks like he will be questionable for Saturday's game, and Tech really needs him. I mean, Will Hammond, talented quarterback, showed flashes in that TCU game as a true freshman, but he's also capable of making mistakes, as we saw last weekend. My thing is, I'm just not sure if Hammond's going to be able to handle being on the road in a place like Jack Trice and going up against a defense coached by John Haycock. Like, he's going to draw something up good for him. The other concern here, obviously with Morton South, is like, is he going to give it a go, and how healthy is he? Like, I could see Tech trying
That's
to
where I was
control the
gonna
game on the ground with Taj Brooks on Saturday. And also if it turns out to be like a rainy game, which is, I think, in the forecast, Tech could go run heavy with Taj Brooks. Either way, I see Iowa State being prepared, especially coming off a bye week. Like, Taj Brooks is definitely their best player offensively. I don't think there's any question about that. And as for Texas Tech's defense, as I mentioned, there's not much to worry about. Like, they struggle to get pressure up front, and their secondary is garbage, to lightly put it. So they have the worst pass defense in the country. I could see Taylor Mauser here not being afraid to take some shots down the field with Iowa State's weapons. But overall, my concern level isn't too high for this game for Iowa State. I feel pretty confident that they're going to take care of business against Tech.
I'd put my concern level at about a 5, I think, 10 being the worst. And a lot of it comes down to the weather, because on paper, this does, I think, shape to be a pretty good matchup for Iowa State. But when you factor in the rain, can that neutralize the Iowa State passing attack? It very well could. And then if that neutralizes Iowa State's biggest strength, and in return also neutralizes Tech's biggest weakness, that's where things could get a little dicey. And they've got one of the 5 best running backs in the Big 12. But again, I think it all does come back to, even if the rain makes it a little more challenging for Iowa State's offense, is it going to make it that much more challenging to where a defense like Texas Tech that we have been extremely critical of, does it help them enough to pull out the win? I don't think so, but I do think the concern level on my end is moderate. And again, it comes back to the slow starts. I would like to see Iowa State take the ball to start the game. Just go out and score. Give yourself a 7-0 lead, 3-0 lead. I think it would just make things a lot easier. And at that point, you're asking a 70% Baron Morton to go out and try and beat you through the air, or you're asking a true freshman to do it. And no matter what I think about this true freshman quarterback, Will Hammond, I think he's going to be a player. I don't hate the idea of his first start being on the road against John Haycock. That could very well shape out to be a good day for Iowa State.
Agreed.
Let's talk a little bit more about Iowa State athletics. It's a hot topic. Probably will always be a hot topic as long as athletic director Jamie Pollard is in charge. Derek, should Pollard cave and start selling beer at Jack Trice Stadium?
I feel like everybody just knows my answer as I sit here chugging a beer in front of this camera here. 110%. And I've discussed it with you guys before, but why don't they sell beer at Jack Trice? First of all, everyone does it. Most of the Big 12 schools do, including TCU, which is a Christian school. So I don't think it has to do anything with moral values. I saw Jamie Pollard release that statement to the season ticket holders. My thought is, if you want people to stop leaving at halftime, sell beer inside the damn stadium. If you don't want people going back to the tailgate, chug alcohol, then sell it inside. No, not all people, but some people will slow down a little bit when they have to pay for the booze. And if you want, you could stop selling it after the third quarter. From everything that I've seen, listened to, and read, like selling beer inside the stadium has actually decreased incidents. The biggest point of all this, though, is that they're missing out on all the money that they could be making selling beer. They're leaving literally millions and millions of dollars on the table by not selling alcohol at Jack Trice or at Hilton Coliseum. And in today's world of college athletics, like, you can't do that, especially in the Big 12, where, let's be honest here, we don't make as much money as the Big 10 and the SEC. Like, the Big 12 schools need money, and they need as much as they possibly can get, and they have to find creative ways to generate revenue. And selling alcohol is one of the easiest money makers out there. I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just when you're on a tight budget, when you're trying to make a guy like Matt Campbell, TJ Altenberger happy, it'd be a little bit better to have an extra $2.5 million in revenue. For argument's sake, let me go from Pollard's side. I guess the liability of not wanting the effects of alcohol on your hands, I get it. I totally get it. As far as the part that I probably have seen the most, and that's because I have been the elitist, not at a football game, but at Hilton Coliseum, I've had the Johnny's Hall of Fame tickets to where I could go in and drink beer in the suites and then go back out and watch the game. And I've had that feeling of like, wow, now this is a luxury. And I get why people pay a pretty penny for it. So if you follow that logic over to football, where are you missing out on revenue by selling alcohol to the general public? Absolutely. But are you making it up in selling the premium and luxury seats for more? You're probably making it up a little bit. So that's the part I get. And I know that the big boosters, the big donors probably like the feeling of, yeah, I'm in here sipping on my beer and nobody else is. So that's my take on it. But if I was in charge, there would be Ames Lager flowing through the 6,100 or 61,500 people at Jack Trice Stadium.
Absolutely. 100%.
And also, I think as far as the safety goes, everyone talks about how the binge drinking would cut down, the shotgunning right before the game or sneaking the shooters in would cut down. I agree with all of that. I also think the beer consumption would go down because instead of drinking a 24-pack for $20 in the parking lot, you're paying $9 for a draft beer. You're like, I don't know if I want to go spend another $9 and wait in line. So I think in that end to it, it makes it a little bit safer too. But
for sure.
Aiden, please tell me you made the Big 12 quarterback, the random Big 12 quarterback, a little bit easier this week. I got complaints. I got complaints from family members, from friends, from concerned listeners last week that was way too hard of a question. So,
well, what do you do? All right. This quarterback led the country in passing his senior season. He finished top 10 in Heisman voting. And he was the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award winner his senior year. So remember all that, and he didn't win the Heisman. He wasn't even first team all Big 12.
Ooh. Is it Trevor Knight?
No.
Trevor Knight never led the conference in anything ever in his life. No offense, but
he was a 3-year starter.
Actually, I have a second guess.
I
don't. You guess first.
One guy that pops in. Did he play in the state of Texas?
He did not.
He did not. Okay. Led the nation in passing yards his senior year.
Yep.
Ooh.
90 career touchdown passes.
I have a guess, but I don't know if that's it. You want to go? You want to go, Jake?
Yeah, I've got a more educated guess this time. Is it Chase Daniel?
It's not.
I don't know why. My mind's taking me to Mason Rudolph, Oklahoma State.
It is Mason Rudolph.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay.
Look at this guy.
Wow.
Okay. That was a pretty good one. I had to think. I kept thinking maybe it was Bryce Petty, but I was like, I don't think Bryce Petty from Baylor was a 3-year starter.
So that was going to be my second guess before he said no Texas.
Yeah, because I was thinking Bryce Petty at first, and then we said no Texas. Okay, I think it's Mason Rudolph. So okay.
He has some hilarious rushing stats. He had 220 career attempts for a grand total of 25 yards rushing.
Wow.
But he had 17 touchdowns on the ground.
I remember him coming in like 2014 would have been his freshman season. Like Oklahoma State was like a fringe bowl team, and they brought him in, and he just started lighting it up, and he was the starter ever since. So he had quite the career there. That was the James Washington years at Oklahoma State. They were really, really good on offense.
He's still sticking around too in the NFL.
Yep.
He got to start. He got to start a few weeks ago. But let's get into our picks for week 10. We had a close week last week. Derek went 4-3. I went 3-4.
Bounce back week for both of us, really.
Yeah, we both needed to get close to 500. I would have liked to obviously get over 500, but I'll take that over whatever the week before was. 1-7, I think. Bad. But week 10, an odd slate. So you've got BYU and Colorado on a bye. So 2 of the top 4 teams are playing, and we're going to start with one of those top 4 teams. The 17th ranked Kansas State Wildcats make a trip to Houston, where K-State's favored by 13.5 with the over-under at 46.5 for a 2:30 kickoff. Derek, where are you going?
As we all know, weird things can happen in Houston. This might be the best offense Houston has seen in a while, and I've been saying that this Kansas State team is dangerous. After that Kansas game, I expect the Wildcats to come out hot, so I'm taking the Kansas State Wildcats to cover here.
I like the under. It's hard for me to envision Houston scoring more than 14 or 17 points in this game, and then even if that happens, I can't see this game finding its way up too high into the 50s. So I feel pretty comfortable going under 46.5 points. Man, this game had a lot of potential at the beginning of the season. Quite the stinker now. Arizona at UCF. The home team is favored by 6.5 with the over-under at 55.5 for a 230 kick on FS1.
I don't trust either team here, and that line is a little high for my liking on UCF. Neither team's very good. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. The only way this goes over is if Fafita throws for over 300 yards, and I don't see that happening with the offensive line that he has in front of him going against UCF's defensive front. So I'm going to take the under here.
My gut, when there's a line that I don't like in this conference among two bad teams, is just take the points. So I'm going to swallow Arizona 6.5 and just hope that it's a one-score football game, and obviously not a touchdown. A touchdown or less, I should say.
Yep.
But you know what I meant. The next one, my Arizona Sun Devils, led by Heisman frontrunner Cameron Skattebo, go to the winless in Big 12 play Oklahoma State Cowboys. 6 o'clock on FS1. The Sun Devils are favored by 3 with the over-under at 58.5.
Everything in my head is telling me Arizona State here. The Sun Devils are going to run Cam Skattebo a lot, and Oklahoma State has the worst run defense in the Big 12. But it's homecoming in Stillwater. The Cowboys will wear one of those awesome throwback uniforms, and there's something about them playing on homecoming. My heart is telling me to take the Pokes here, and that's what I'm doing. Mike Gundy's back is against the wall. Their bowl streak's on the line. Oklahoma State covers and keeps the bowl streak alive for at least one more week here.
I think Oklahoma State has to get a win at some point. They're not going 0-9 in conference play. There's no way. And I agree. The line's fishy. The line's really, really fishy. They're wanting you to take Arizona State, I think. And I'm going to bite. I'm going to take the bait. I'm going to be a homer. I'll take the Sun Devils -3 on the road.
Come on.
I think I've lost 3 or 4 picks just by taking Arizona State to cover with my heart, and it's bit me. But this week it's going to get me, I promise. So far, no locks. I haven't felt great about a pick yet. This next one, though, I feel good about. TCU at Baylor, 7 o'clock game on ESPN2. The Bears favored by a field goal. The over-under is 64.5.
Baylor's been playing well over the last 2 weeks, but TCU to me has more juice. I'm counting on Josh Hoover playing well and not turning the football over, because that is what this game's going to come down to. This may be called the Bluebonnet Battle, but it's still the rivalry to me, and they need to throw that ugly-ass trophy that they made last year in the garbage where it belongs. I'm breaking out the money gun for this one, because forget the spread. Give me TCU, the Horned Frogs, going into Waco and winning outright as my lock of the week, baby. So I'm taking the Frogs.
I'm going against your lock with a lock of my own.
Look at that.
The dollar stuck to the bill of your hat.
Hopefully that's impressive. A good sign.
Well, here's a good sign. I don't know what trash can that Bluebonnet trophy is getting thrown in, but it's going to end up in the hands of Dave Aranda at the end of the night. Baylor's winning by a field goal, and I'm calling this one a lock. My only lock of the week. So going head-to-head on our locks.
Closing locks there. Okay.
That's I think a bad sign. I don't really know. We'll close out, as we always do, with the 11th ranked Iowa State Cyclone football varsity team hosting Texas Tech. At last check, Iowa State was favored by 14.5. The over-under is 56.5 with some rain in the forecast.
I've been picking Iowa State week in and week out, and it's worked out so far, but that spread way too high for me. Iowa State wins, but give me the Tech backdoor cover here. I know it's not a sexy pick, but that's just how I feel here.
I'm with you. I think Tech covers, but I'm going to go with the under, actually.
Oh.
Everything on paper says over, but rain in Ames, when you've already got the grass field, it can be slippery on a dry day. There's going to be a lot of guys slipping, and I think that usually probably plays in the favor of the under. So that's the side I'm going to take. I think Iowa State wins a game something like 30-20 or 24-17. Definitely lower scoring than most think. And even then I would have thought until I saw the forecast. Just keep the rain away. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's dry. I hope it's a nice day, and I hope this hits 80 because just I hate working in the rain. It's the absolute worst. Give me snow over rain any single day for a football game. But Derek, you won. You won week 9. Congratulations. You've got a minute of fame. Talk about whatever the heck you want.
I'm going to try to squeeze this all into maybe more than a minute, but I want to spend some time here talking about the AP poll and the national media. I know that we are less than a week away from the college football playoff rankings, and we can just toss the AP poll in the garbage where it belongs, but I could not help myself this past week. Reddit College Football, shout out to them. They released a full breakdown of every AP voter's top 25 poll, and I'm sure that drives the voters crazy. Well, maybe some of them, because it's obvious to me that some of them simply don't give a flying you-know-what about it. For instance, I wanted to point out 2 people. The first is Eric Hansen, who covers Notre Dame for the South Bend Tribune. He has Notre Dame at number 7 ahead of BYU and Iowa State. In fact, he doesn't even have Iowa State in his top 15, yet he also has 2 SEC teams with 2 losses in front of the Cyclones. I guess he did not get to cover that game where Notre Dame lost to a 4-4 Northern Illinois team, or that he completely erased it from his memory. I don't know. Maybe he can tell us. The sad thing here, that poll wasn't even the worst that I saw, because there were others that were equally as bad, but the worst came from Mason Young, who covers Oklahoma at the Tulsa World. Get this. This man had Notre Dame ahead of BYU, Iowa State, and had a 2-loss Alabama team in front of an Iowa State team. And get this, didn't even include Kansas State in his top 25. I guess if I had to cover Oklahoma football this season, I wouldn't be too happy either, because considering Kansas State would regularly beat Oklahoma in their final years in the Big 12, I used to think that the AP poll didn't matter. Honestly, I did. But it does matter, because it gives the playoff committee an idea of where to rank these teams. It essentially gives them a base of where to start. And after I just gave you 2 of these voters' polls, like, what kind of base is that? It'd be one that would crumble if I farted on it. I mean, I'm saying all this because I'm trying to prepare you folks for what is coming. The SEC and the Big Ten will have multiple teams in the playoff. There's no doubt about that. I mean, hell, remember when they wanted 4 spots every year? We may not even need to ask, because it might just happen just because they get in. I mean, the national media and the AP poll is already setting the narrative in motion. There's going to be voters and committee members that will not be afraid to put in 2 or 3 loss SEC or Big Ten teams in front of a 1-loss Big Ten team. Hell, some AP voters now aren't even afraid to put 2-loss teams in front of undefeated Big 12 teams. And if that's the case, then why even play the games? If the results of the games do not matter, then why bother? You only need 12 games each year. You get 12 games each year. In the SEC's case, they only get 8 conference games. The reason we keep scoring football is to predict a winner and a loser, and it's clear to some people they can give a crap less about a certain team as long as a certain brand gets in. After all, the playoff, as we've heard before, is a TV product. The reason I brought up all this is because I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm not the voice of the Big 12 or anything like that, but whenever I see bullshit, I call it out, and that's exactly what all this is. It's bullshit. I just hope the playoff committee is smart enough to do the right thing come December. And I've seen so many comments when I tweeted about this, I think yesterday or on Monday or whatever it was, but I was talking about these AP poll voters and how they voted Notre Dame ahead of these Big 12 teams, and having 2-loss SEC teams go ahead of an undefeated BYU or an Iowa State. And then I see comments of actual people like that cover football saying like, yeah, but Alabama would be favored over an Iowa State in this scenario. And Notre Dame, they would be favored over BYU by like 30 points. And I was like, okay, well, what was Notre Dame favored over Illinois? What was that spread and what happened in that game? Like, at some point, the results have to matter. Like, winning matters. That's why we play these damn games. I'm sick and tired of looking at power index ratings or whatever bullcrap ESPN or Fox puts out or what Joel Klatt says. I don't care. Results of the game still matter. That's why we still play them. That's my rant for the week.
I'll let that be your minute of fame. I have absolutely nothing to add. Took the words right out my mouth. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Frustrating.
Let's just cancel the regular season. We'll just
play it on paper.
We'll just go over to a recruiting site, take the top 12 team rankings, and we'll just throw it in there. And surely those are the 12 best teams, anyways. Because Northern Illinois, their recruiting class of 110. There's no way they could go into South Bend and even compete with Notre Dame. So why even try? Why even play the game? It's ridiculous. But we went long today. It was a good episode. Good show. Good content. Good rant at the end. Probably the highlight of the show.
No, we had some good moments during the show. I don't want that to be the highlight. I don't want me getting pissed off to be the highlight of the show.
Well, I know what the highlight of my week's going to be. It's going to be when I make my way over to Freedom Tire on Thursday and get an oil change. So thanks to Freedom Tire as always. Thank you to WealthCharter Retirement Planning and Tax. Thanks for simplifying wealth for Iowans all around. And thanks to the viewers, the listeners of every program on Iowa Everywhere. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Bigger Than 12. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review, and tell your friends.